powered by Riverside FM.
Welcome to another edition of Unconventional Playbook. This is a What If Wednesday. And I've been getting feedback about my What If Wednesdays. Some people like them, some people don't like them. I had somebody last week talking about them trying to stir the pot when I was talking about what if the Atlanta Falcons didn't jump the Minnesota Vikings in the first round of the draft last year to get Michael Penix Jr. Some people thought that that was stirring the pot, saying I shouldn't look in the past. We've got J.J. McCarthy. Let's move on. Dude, I'm pro J.J. McCarthy. I love the pick. I'm actually glad the Atlanta Falcons did it because I like the pick of J.J. McCarthy. What I'm trying to do here is open up minds to dive deep into some what ifs. Because what people don't realize is that when things happen, like it creates a butterfly effect. This is what I was trying to tell you the last time. And sometimes it's a little bit fun to think about it. I'm an inquisitive person. I used to like the comic books when it was like, what if the Incredible Hulk fought Superman? You know, I used to think of things like that. So in the football context, I love football. So I'm adding the what if into UP Nation, into Unconventional Playbook. And so I would like just some engagement. People think about some of this stuff. Think about some of this stuff. You don't have to take it seriously, but it's fun. It's fun to think about. The what if Wednesday for today is, listen, I love KOC. I love KOC to death. Coach of the year. I wouldn't trade KOC for anybody. KOC is our guy. He's going to take the Vikings to the promised land. I've been saying that ever since KOC was hired. If there is anybody that's going to take the Minnesota Vikings where the Minnesota Vikings need to get, it's going to be Kevin O'Connell. It's going to be KOC. But at one time before we hired KOC, we were looking at somebody else. We were looking at Jim Harbaugh. And I know there are a lot of people out there that wanted Jim Harbaugh to be our next head coach. I remember the podcast. I remember when Jim Harbaugh was in town, there were people who was like, don't let him get back on the plane. Let's hire Jim Harbaugh. So the what if Wednesday today is, what if the Minnesota Vikings had hired Jim Harbaugh instead of KOC? Man, there's just a lot to think about there. There's a lot to unpackage. The team and the direction of the team would look completely different, whether you're with Kevin O'Connell or whether you're not with Kevin O'Connell, whether you're a Jim Harbaugh fan or whether you're not a Jim Harbaugh fan. The team would look completely different. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you that. And I think no one regrets the hire of KOC. And I know there are a lot of people out there that criticize his play calling, and there are times where you're not going to necessarily agree 100% with what the head coach is doing, but you can't disagree with the direction that the Minnesota Vikings are going. Kevin O'Connell has a 13-win season under his belt, just finishing up a 14-win season under his belt. So you can't argue the direction in which this team is going. I don't think there's too many people. There's always going to be some. But I don't think there's too many people that regret the Minnesota Vikings hiring Jim Harbaugh. But what if they did? The one thing that I can guarantee, what people don't realize, Jim Harbaugh wanted out in Michigan. They were trying to run him out in Michigan. You know, he could barely beat Ohio State. When Urban Meyer was there, Urban Meyer was running roughshod over Jim Harbaugh. Urban Meyer was undefeated against Michigan. He's undefeated against Michigan. They couldn't win. The alumni was upset. He had his 1 foot in the NFL, 1 foot in with the Michigan team. People were wondering how committed Jim Harbaugh actually was to Michigan. They were actually worried about that. Then you find out that Michigan had the ability to win a national championship. If Jim Harbaugh is hired by the Minnesota Vikings, think about this. See, this is how what if Wednesdays work. Michigan would have never won a national championship. Because the domino effect of a guy like Jim Harbaugh leaving doesn't matter who the next head coach is. And you're going to have players transfer. J.J. McCarthy may not stay there under Jim Harbaugh. There's just a lot of dominoes that fall into place when you talk about head coaches moving. But he stayed there and won a national championship. If he comes to the Minnesota Vikings, he doesn't win that. He doesn't win that. If he goes to the Minnesota Vikings, think about the cheating scandal that Michigan had. And yes, they're cheaters. They won a national championship by cheating. Scouting, being on other teams' sidelines, videotaping signs, videotaping other teams' sideline, doing whatever they could by any means necessary to win. And I think all of that stuff came into place because they wanted Jim Harbaugh out of there. This is what a lot of people don't remember. The last couple of years have been gravy for Michigan because Jim Harbaugh got them to a place where they can win a national championship and they can win, albeit they cheated. I don't care what anybody says. They cheated. And if he comes to Minnesota, if he doesn't get back on the plane, if Kwesi Adofo-Mensah signs him to be the next head coach of the Vikings, there is no scandal at Michigan. This is how What If Wednesdays work. It's crazy to think about. It's crazy to think about. Think about the year that Sam Darnold have. Odds are, if Jim Harbaugh is the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings, Sam Darnold's probably not here. Sam Darnold's probably not here. And you can argue because he's such a run-centric coach that our offensive line is probably a little bit more fortified. He has a really good defensive background. The defensive trenches probably a little bit better. But do we draft a guy like Jordan Addison? See, my guess is Jordan Addison's not here. They use that draft pick on somebody else. KOC is more of an offensive type guy. I remember at the time when we chose Jordan Addison, people were like, what do we need another wide receiver for? Jordan Addison has turned out to be a pretty good pick that kind of shows you the mind of a guy like Kevin O'Connell going offense in the first round like that. Would Jim Harbaugh have done that? Probably not. You see the butterfly effect? You see the domino effect of these What If Wednesdays? Stuff that you take for granted every day that's happened to the Minnesota Vikings probably would not happen under a Jim Harbaugh regime. It's interesting, man. Would Jim Harbaugh wanted more control in the draft room? It was speculated that he wanted a little bit more control. If he wanted to cook the meal, he wanted an opportunity to buy the groceries. And it was speculated is one of the reasons why they let him get back on the plane. Remember, they wanted somebody that was not in the same realm of a personality as Zimmer was. And Jim Harbaugh's not Zimmer, but he's very old school. And so usually what happens when you hire the new coach after your previous coach, you go the exact opposite way of what the old coach was like. That's just the way it goes in the NFL. So odds are Jim Harbaugh would have wanted to have a lot of say in who we drafted, when we drafted, and how we drafted. Because Kwesi's draft picks have not been stellar. His free agency has been absolutely fantastic, but his draft picks leave a lot to be desired. I think everybody, UP Nation, would agree on that. If Jim Harbaugh was involved in that draft room, it's another brain, it's another personality, right? So you could argue that maybe the drafts would have been a little bit better. Collaborating with a guy like Jim Harbaugh, football guy. A guy that's probably going to build from within the trenches. Not necessarily focused on a lot of skill guys. But getting that defense ready, getting that running game ready, that has been Jim Harbaugh. And it's not throwing any shade on KOC, but that's just the type of personality that Jim Harbaugh is. And that's why Kwesi Adofo-Mensah let him get back on the plane. I think that was a big reason why they let him get back on the plane. Remember, Jim Harbaugh came here thinking he was going to sign a contract. Something happened on his visit to the Minnesota Vikings for them to allow him to get back on that plane. And I think that had a lot to do with it. The team would be shaped different. I'm not saying the team would be shaped for the better. It's hard to beat 14-3. It's hard to beat 13-3 your first year. Kevin O'Connell has done a fantastic job. But isn't it fun to think about where we are now? We're headed in the right direction. We just got to do some things right in this year free agency period with the salary cap money we got in the draft. But at times, don't you ever wonder, what if? There's no harm in that. It's a lot of fun. We came this close to hiring Jim Harbaugh, and we just gave the coach of the year to Kevin O'Connell. Just think about that. Just think about that. Jim Harbaugh in his first year takes the San Diego Chargers to the playoffs. They get bounced in the first round, but he got them to the playoffs in their first year. But there's no disputing that we picked and we chose the right coach in Kevin O'Connell, reigning coach of the year and well-deserved. 2 seasons with 13 wins or more, first time in Minnesota Vikings history, I believe. Kevin O'Connell's the man. But sometimes there are times where you regret what you do, and sometimes you feel like you dodged a bullet. Would a Jim Harbaugh hire been dodging a bullet? And we got the right guy. But we came this close to hiring a Jim Harbaugh. And if we hire a Jim Harbaugh, the University of Michigan more than likely doesn't get their national championship, which probably doesn't motivate my Ohio State Buckeyes to do what they did this past offseason with a $20 million NIL deal with various players to catapult them to a national championship. Man, there's just tentacles everywhere to this stuff, and I like to talk about it. Put your thoughts in the comments. Do you think we would have been better off with Jim Harbaugh as our coach, or do you like KOC? Man, I'm rolling with KOC. I'm just telling you. You know what I'm going to put in the comments. But again, let me know your thoughts, man. I just want to hear them. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Please consider becoming a member. This has been Unconventional Playbook, and as you always know, we will see you when we see you.